You're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Asian stocks plunge in their worst drop in decades, triggered by Donald Trump's Liberation Day tariffs. Hong Kong's Hang Seng ends down 13.22%, its worst day since the 1997 Asian financial crisis. Germany's DAX plunges nearly 4.46% and the UK's FTSE 100 drops 3.99% as panic hits European markets. France's CAC 40 is also down 4.42% in a turbulent start to trading in Europe. Benjamin Netanyahu becomes the first foreign leader to meet President Donald Trump in Washington, D.C. since the Liberation Day tariffs shocked markets. He's seeking relief from tariffs and more U.S. support on Iran and Gaza after a failed ceasefire. The Kremlin says it's ready to help ease U.S.-Iran nuclear tensions. This follows Donald Trump has threats to bomb Iran if Tehran doesn't strike a deal with Washington. China condemns Trump's reciprocal tariffs, calling them economic bullying and unilateralism. Beijing says threats and pressure won't work and accuses the U.S. of putting its interests above all others. The Kremlin says huge questions remain on a Ukraine truce put forward by the U.S. Meanwhile, Kyiv is sending officials to Washington this week to advance a deal giving the U.S. priority access to Ukrainian natural resources. French President Emmanuel Macron says Hamas should have no place in Gaza's future and must not threaten Israel. While speaking in Egypt, he backs the Arab League's Gaza reconstruction plan. The United Kingdom may shut hundreds of government-backed bodies to slash costs and boost efficiency, citing a new era of global instability. Targets include bodies like Network Rail and the Migration Advisory Committee. Our top focus: global markets plunge after Donald Trump defended the tariffs, calling them quote-unquote a medicine and warning foreign governments that they will need to pay heavily to lift them. Meanwhile, U.S. markets are bracing for their worst fall in nearly 40 years amid rising fears of higher prices, weaker demand and the risk of global recession. Futures signal further weakness ahead in the U.S. For the S&P 500, they lost 3.4%, while the Dow Jones Industrial Average shed 3.1%. Futures for the Nasdaq lost 5.3%. If the pre-market future losses materialize when the U.S. market opens, the S&P 500 will enter the bear market territory, defined as a fall of more than 20% from the peak. The index was off 17.4% as of the end of last week. Meanwhile, stock markets across Asia and Europe have dropped sharply as the shockwaves from United States President Donald Trump's tariffs continue to be felt around the world. European trade officials are meeting in Luxembourg to discuss response to Trump's move, with Germany calling the U.S. tariff policy nonsense. Southeast Asian economic ministers will also hold a meeting on the 10th of April to discuss the next step forward after they were among the hardest hit by the U.S. tariffs. Hong Kong's stock market suffered the steepest single-day decline in nearly 3 decades, a staggering 13.22%. Its worst drop since the 1997 Asian financial crisis, amid a wave of panic selling brought on by Trump's tariff announcements. Tokyo's Nikkei 225 index lost nearly 8% shortly after the market opened, and futures trading for the benchmark was briefly suspended. However, it closed down 7.8%. The Shanghai Composite Index lost 7.3%, while South Korea's KOSPI closed down 5.6%, marking its biggest daily percentage fall since the 5th of August 2024. India's stock benchmarks closed their worst session in 10 months, as the tariff-fueled sell-off intensified and investors dumped risky assets on growing fears of a global recession. The Nifty 50 opens new tab lost 3.24% to 22,161.1 points, while the BSE Sensex opened a new tab, fell to 2.95% to 73,137.9 points. Germany's DAX index briefly fell more than 10% at the open to the Frankfurt exchange, but recovered some ground to move down 4.46% as of 1 a.m. GMT. In Paris, the CAC 40 shed 4.42%, while Britain's FTSE 100 lost 3.99%. My colleague Akshata Thomas joins us from the newsroom. Akshata, take our viewers through the latest on the stock exchange.
Yes, Devika. So right now the bell has rung on the New York Stock Exchange, and the trading is currently underway. Right in the first few moments of the trade, we saw S&P 500 figures down to 3.4%. Dow and Jones was down to 3.1%, and lower NASDAQ has fallen down to 4.1%. Let's take a look at the current figures to see how they've recovered or if they're further steeping down. If we take a look at Dow Jones, we can see that they had fallen down when they initially opened up, and now they're at 1.46%. And if we take a look at S&P index, they're looking up at 0.97%. And if we take a look at NASDAQ, it's fallen worse, it's at 1.47. But if we take a look at the US markets, there's a slight respite, they're sort of recovering. NASDAQ in fact is looking up with a 1.6%. And if we further look into the European markets, which are currently underway, FTSE is right now at a 3.50%. We move on to DAX index, which is at a 4.19%. And if we take a look at CAC, it's at a 4.16%. And we can clearly see that although US markets were heavily affected, the moment they had opened up, there's a slight respite, there's a slight recovery which is taking place. But European markets have been heavily affected, and much worse, Asian markets have taken a much bigger hit. And this is one of their biggest hits since 1997 market crisis. So we are yet to get a clearer picture on the US markets, but we can just say that the European and Asian markets have taken a much bigger hit.
Okay.
Thank you, Devika. Over to you.
Akshata, thank you so much for that update. Joining me on the broadcast is Daniel Wagner, CEO of County Risk Solution from Colorado, United States of America. Mr. Wagner, I of course begin by asking you, how exactly are the general public and investors reacting to what is being called a bloodbath in the stock exchange?
The bloodbath continues, although it's being tempered, as your colleague just noted. I think we're going to be in a period here of protracted downward movement. Question is it going to be for days, weeks, or months? Let's bear in mind that it took generations to get to this trade regime that the US is now in the process of leaving, or wanting to leave, I should say. And it's going to take some
Okay, we seem to be having some connection issues with Mr. Daniel Wagner. Mr. Wagner, can you hear me? Okay, we seem to have lost that line with Mr. Daniel Wagner. But viewers, in other news, Canada has requested dispute consultations with the U.S. or the World Trade Organization over President Donald Trump's 25% tariffs on cars and car parts from Canada. The Canadian government argues that the tariffs violate the U.S.'s obligations under the 1994 General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. The WTO is now set to handle the matter, marking another escalation in global trade tensions. In other news, the European Union has reaffirmed its willingness to negotiate with the U.S. over President Donald Trump's sweeping import tariffs. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen emphasized that the EU is ready to offer zero-for-zero tariffs on industrial goods, as it has with other trading partners. Von der Leyen also announced the creation of an import surveillance task force to protect the EU from trade diversion. Meanwhile, Eurozone yields hit a new 2.5-year low amid concerns over the economic fallout from the tariffs. Donald Trump has warned that countries would have to pay a lot of money to lift these tariffs, calling them quote-unquote medicine. Let's listen in to what the European Commission president had to say. In other news, Marine Le Pen, leader of France's far-right National Rally Party, vowed to fight a judicial decision that could bar her from running in the next presidential election. Le Pen has called the ruling a political move and claimed that it trampled on her honor and rights. Speaking to supporters at a rally in Paris, Le Pen said that she was a victim of a witch hunt and promised not to give up. She also stated that her party, the National Rally, was the true defender of the rule of law. Let's listen in to her comments.
Continuer à lutter comme nous le faisons dans la discipline et la dignité, malgré les provocations qui ne manqueront pas d'intervenir et auxquelles, au désespoir de nos opposants, nous ne céderons pas.
Meanwhile, Le Pen supporters, including party president Jean Bardella, claim that the ruling is an attack on the French democracy and an effort to silence its voice. Listen in.
Dans quelle démocratie digne de ce nom on cherche à mettre à mort financièrement le premier parti de France? Dans quelle démocratie digne de ce nom on interdit à la chef de l'opposition de se présenter à l'élection suprême? Dans quelle démocratie digne de ce nom tout est mis en œuvre pour empêcher le premier parti de France lors des dernières élections de gouverner le pays?
In response to left-wing protesters gathered a few kilometers away with the left-wing leaders in their presence, they've called Le Pen's defense a full-blown attack on judicial independence. Le Pen was convicted of embezzling over 4 million euros of European Parliament funds. She's been sentenced to 4 years in prison with 2 years suspended and $100,000 euros fine. She was also barred from public office for 5 years. A court will be reviewing her case next year. The court's decision has stirred political debate, with far-right politicians calling it an attack on democracy. This is the latest information coming in from France, which is due for elections in the next 2 years. France's far-right National Rally leader Marine Le Pen has called the court ruling that has banned her from running for office a quote-unquote witch hunt. Gautam Mukherjee, senior journalist, joining me on the broadcast. Gautam Mukherjee, I want to understand from your perspective, do you feel that this particular ruling in France could have an impact on the French elections?
Yes, I would say that Emmanuel Macron and his party were very rattled with the constant rise of the right wing. I wouldn't call them far right. Far right is derogatory in terms of what it implies, that they are not quite democratic and part of the constitutional, parameters. They are merely right of center. And Marine Le Pen has been runner-up in the last two elections, 12 as well as 17. This is rattling Macron and his party, as well as those left parties which support him. So this, while they call it independence of the judiciary, most right-wing governments, whether it is Italy or Hungary or Russia or the United States, India has been silent because India gets on rather well with Macron, and there is a lot of defense cooperation going on. So we have not commented, calling it something like the internal matter of France. However, the fact that the court, the Paris court, has made a rather semantic distinction. This is not 4 million euros that went into Le Pen and 24 others who have been convicted along with her, except for one person who were amongst the accused. It didn't go into their pockets. Instead, what they said was this was European Union money and should have been used for European Union parliamentarians. Instead, it was used by Marine Le Pen's party. The defense said, that is Marine Le Pen and friends' defense said, that this is a specious distinction. It really, there is no line between the two. The people in the party are the same people who are parliamentarians. So what's the problem? The sentence on Marine Le Pen, which is the largest, is 2 years suspended sentence and 2 years house arrest with electronic surveillance. Others have got 1 year of various kinds, but all of them have been banned from participating in elections for 5 years or somewhat less than that. This, let us hope, is overturned in appeal, which in the French courts takes quite a long time. So the appeal is now going to be a few months ahead or even next year. But this is totally unfair, and it smacks of machinations behind the scenes by the ruling party of Macron and his friends, influencing the judiciary, even though the judiciary claims to be independent. Devika.
Gautam Mukherjee, at the same time, what really could be the larger impact, given that European nations are also dealing currently with the tariff and trade war? So Emmanuel Macron would have a lot to prove in the next few years.
Yeah, well, the tariff and trade wars, his position is fairly in concert with Britain and Germany. They want to fight Trump, which is, I think, a misguided approach. If they had decided to accept the Elon Musk proposal, which is to drop all tariffs completely to zero on both sides, then the matter would be over. But somehow they wish to take the United States on, and given the states of their economy, the smaller countries like Spain and Italy are already not doing well. But in terms of the Ukraine war and so on, which they also wish to prosecute with or without the United States, there's a lot of misguided work going on. It's not just Trump's tariffs, it's also the way they wish to proceed with the Ukraine war and the support that they're offering to Zelensky, which smacks of trying to substitute what America is withholding. I don't think they have the wherewithal to do so.
Gautam Mukherjee, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast with those details. Meanwhile, going back to the global markets plunging after Donald Trump defended the tariffs, calling them medicine and warning foreign governments that they would need to pay heavily to lift them. U.S. markets are bracing for their worst fall in nearly 40 years amid rising fears of higher prices, weaker demand and the risk of global recession. Joining me on the broadcast is Mr. Arvind Mahajan, Lamar Savings Professor of Finance, Texas A&M University. Professor Mahajan, I of course begin by asking you, how exactly is the public in the United States of America now reacting to what is being called a bloodbath on the stock exchange?
Yeah, I think the market is reacting. The public is trying to digest the information. I think there is a lot of fear in the market. We have the VIX index, which measures volatility in the stock market, and it has suddenly spiked up. So basically, I think there is just a lot of uncertainty in the market. And it is unclear if the benefits of the tariffs, when they are going to accrue. And so far, the market just sees the cost of the tariffs and it's reacting to it.
And Professor Mahajan, what really, in your assessment, will the next few months look like? Because there was a lot of chatter about inflation, but there is also now some worries about recession.
Yes. And, forecasting having studied the market for 45 years, one thing one does not to do is try to forecast the market because the market has its own dynamics. But one can try to connect the dots in as far as the macroeconomic variables go. And we've had that problem actually for quite a while. The tariffs have exasperated the problem, but the Fed has been in this situation of trying a soft landing because the numbers on inflation have been somewhat mixed. Unemployment numbers have been strong. People expected recession, but that did not happen. And all those things have been exasperated with the tariffs. Tariffs have injected another uncertainty in the marketplace. So what's going to happen over the next couple of years is really anyone's bet. I have been an optimist in the market, was an optimist in 1987 when we saw Black Monday. That was the day when the market declined at 26.4%. We've not come close to that yet. S&P is down close to about 19%. We'll see how the market ends today. But things are pretty dire right now in the market, but the market can turn around as well. I mean, the issues, the unknowns remain very much what they were over the last couple of years. Unemployment rate, employment has been very strong. Inflation was coming down, slowed down, is slightly going up. Anticipation is that the tariffs will make the inflation go up again, which complicates the job of the Fed because it cannot reduce the interest rates. But with the market going down, Trump is insisting that the Fed reduce the interest rates, and easy monetary policy does help the market. So Fed is in a fix as to whether to increase the interest rates or reduce the interest rates. Consensus seemed to me a few weeks ago that you could only expect 1 or 2 reductions in interest rates at all. I think they have gone up to 3 to 5. So there's just a lot of uncertainty in the market at this juncture, and at a more fundamental level, it is unclear how other countries are going to respond to Trump's tariff initiative. The expectation is, and that is what the administration is hoping, is that other countries behind the scenes will come and reduce the tariffs significantly so that the US does not impose the tariffs. And some countries have already started those dialogues, that conversation. but it's really unclear how much of that will happen, and that's going to take a while for things to get sorted out. In
Yes.
particular, in the case of China, for example. So, right now, things are in a serious flux, and smart investors are just waiting to understand what is going on rather than reacting to the market.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Professor Mahajan, for joining us on NewsX World. Well, that's all that we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.